Okay.
Rewind.
Okay. Rewind. Good evening, Toastmasters and honored guests. It's my pleasure as president of War Beavers to welcome you all here for a exciting evening to celebrate life and once upon a time. As as a president, I want to say I am so proud of this group, what we have accomplished, and it's awesome. And we're going to have fun tonight. And this is my project that we're working on tonight. And I'm just really excited about the whole thing because I wanted to share some new things to bring on to Once Upon a Time. So my idea tonight was table topic, and table topics is going to be a lot of fun because my friend Louise volunteered and thought of it. So I said, "Well, you're in charge." So she's doing that tonight. So we'll have fun when you get to that a little bit. And you have to think about it. The storyline is once upon a time, and then we all add on to the story, and that's going to be a lot of fun. But in the meantime, I like to say is, did you know that storytelling has been around since?
Is considerate, brave, and so generous. He paid for that shower curtain out of his own pocket and wasn't even.
What's going on here?
Hi.
Please silence ourselves unless you are the one with the floor.
I like everyone to be muted, please. Everyone, please be muted. We're starting our meeting. Everyone, please mute. Matthew, would you mute everybody, please? Except for me. I'd like to welcome everyone who just came in. Please be muted. Thank you. Anyway, what I was going to go back to saying was, did you know that storytelling or telling stories has been around since beginning of time? That's one way how we got the storyline about the Bible or the Holy Scriptures was from people telling their stories and writing them down. And then it goes back to Shakespeare. Shakespeare wrote down stories and stuff, and that's how we got stories. So I think it's awesome that we as a group can tell our stories, story time, stories and storytelling and fairy tales tonight. And it's awesome to share our dreams and our thoughts of two new people tonight is myself and Eileen. We're really happy to join the Masters tonight. So you can see that we're going to be off tonight, Eileen. So I like to start saying that here's my story. Once upon a time, there was a young girl who was born in a little town. She was a baby born in a little town. And in this little town, she had three sisters. One's name was Anne, the other one was Mary, and the other one was Sue. And their little sister's name was Louise. Now, Louise was premature. So once in a while in the family, well, they weren't so kind to Louise because she was a little different. But her mother always taught her, just because you're different doesn't mean that you can do things like everyone else. But she went to nursery school. She did all those crazy stuff. And she learned that people can be really mean. But she learned from her experience to be strong. And when she went to grade school, well, she found it wasn't too great to go to grade school where your sisters went. Well, because the teachers always compared you to your three big sisters. They said, "How can you not like your sister?" And I said, "Because I am me. I'm sorry that I have a disability. My mother would tell them that my daughter is not like her big sisters." But we learned in time that the little girl had dyslexia. And so her mother took opportunity to help her little daughter. She got her a tutor to help her get through her disability. But when it was time to move on to to a different school, she learned that kids were not nice at that school either. But she learned just to smile and be happy. And then all of a sudden she found out, oh no, your daughter has allergies. She has to have shots every weekend. And so she had the shots every weekend. So her mother gave Louise a little dog, and that little dog was named Tiny. And Tiny went everywhere with Louise. And then all of a sudden, when Louise got a little older and she went to middle school, all of a sudden she was called into the office. And in the office, they said, you have to go see a doctor. There's something wrong. And so all of a sudden she learned that she had scoliosis. Oh no, scoliosis. And all of a sudden, when she went back to school, she had a brace on, and all the kids were laughing at her. Now she has a disability, and now she has a brace. Oh no. But some kids were nice and some kids were just evil. But she learned from her mother to put on a happy smile, and she did. Then all of a sudden, she was in high school. And in high school, wow, she was in high school. She had school in the 10th grade at home. And that was really awesome because she could kick back and have fun and learned and stuff. And no one was there to tease her or say, you're dumb and stupid. And then all of a sudden, it was back to school again in the 11th grade. In the 11th grade, they weren't very kind to her. In the 11th grade, in her drama class, there was a special person in her drama class. And all of a sudden in that drama class, the kid said, why is he talking to her and not us? And he told the class, well, she's special. She has the gift. And his name was Jay Silverhill. And that forward on, Louise knew that she was good, that she was someone special because she had the vision. And all of a sudden, Louise moved on. She went to her third school. Could you believe it? She moved again. In the third school, she was happy because no one there teased her at all. She was in a school where nobody knew her sisters, and it was party time, and she had a great time. And no one teased her or anything because there, everyone had a disability. And that was kind of cool. And all of a sudden, she graduated. And then all of a sudden, her family says, oh, you're never going to get married. You're never going to graduate from college. But you know what? That made Louise more determined to graduate. And guess what happened? She met her Prince Charming. And she met her Prince Charming, and she graduated from school. And she showed them all up that she had a disability and she can be herself and meet all kinds of people and be someone special because everyone's special in Once Upon a Time. And if you have a dream, you can have that dream too. Just because you're different doesn't mean you can't live your life fully. And she got married. She had 150 people at her wedding, and it was really awesome. And then one day, and once upon a time, they had a little baby. And that baby was named Aaron. And Aaron was the blessing of their life. And they showed their family that just because my wife has a disability doesn't mean she can't have a life, dreams, and a family, and work in all kinds of adventures. Because in Once Upon a Time, it's never a dull moment with Louise. Thank you very much. And I'd like to turn this over to our master tonight, Brad.
Thank you, Deborah. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Deborah. You just heard Deborah mention is Brad Grindrod. I'll be your master of ceremonies tonight. And tonight you're going to hear, well, we didn't hear really a fairy tale, I don't think the first time, but that's what tonight is all about. And tonight you're going to hear a few good fairy tales and perhaps even some evil ones as well. In addition to one or two other genres thrown in just for good measure. So sit back and relax, kick your shoes off if you haven't already, and slip your slippers on. We have 5 more storytellers for you this evening, Toastmasters all, which promises to deliver an entertaining show. So let's get started. Our next storyteller this evening is Larry Crack. Larry is a professional storyteller and inspirational speaker. He created Northwest Comedy Club, where he teaches humor and storytelling and has written 17 books to date. Ladies and gentlemen, here is Larry Crack.
Way back, once upon a time, you know, when there were the castles and the knights in shining armor, there was an old king, and he had one daughter. The queen had been long gone, and the king had got tutors upon tutors and tried to train this daughter, but she would have nothing of it. She would rather play around with goof around with the gesture and play tricks on everybody, ride her donkey over the hills or whatever. And she had flaming red hair. She kept it in braids that went straight out. She didn't want to put her hair up. She didn't want to dress up. It came to the time the old man, the old king, was pretty much on his deathbed. And he says, "You are getting married." "Oh, no, I'm not. My name is Frida. I am free. Frida, free in Fritzburg. You're getting married." So he sent his people all over the area in Germany, close to the Black Forest, and said, "My daughter's hand is up for the best man." So they started arriving. The first to arrive was Adolf of Aufwurstein. Now, Adolf, he came in with his army. He was just marching in. He had like a military. He was in a uniform. He had these medals all the way across him, you know, a DTM medal and a Boy Scout medal and all these medals. And if he would bend over too far, he probably would have toppled forward. But, oh, Frida looked at that guy. "Wow, what's that for?" Well, he made all kinds of excuses. Well, one of her attendants says, "Why don't you just take a walk down by the pond and get to know Adolf a little bit better?" So they went down, her and her pigtails straight out in her riding culottes or whatever, riding dress. And wouldn't you know it, she reached down by the pond and picked up a frog. She says, "You know, I've been kissing these things and hoping I'd get a real prince. Don't you like him? He's cute. Oh, get that thing away from me. Oh, those things freak me out. Oh." And off he took his army and stomped on over there and went back to his castle. He wasn't very brave. What a chicken with all those medals. Well, the next feller that came along, the next prince, his name was Wolfgang of Punxsutawney. And he came prancing in with polka dot shirts and tight pants, you know, tight peak pants. And he was such a fancy Dan. Well, the tenants said, "Enough of the pond stuff. We don't want him to get messed up in the pond there at all anymore." So they decided to have a tea or something and so they brought out the food. It was a 12-course meal, whatever. And well, Frida loved snails, escargot. Oh. And so they served escargot, and she was, eating this thing. Oh, this thing's still alive. Oh, so Wolfgang, he took off on it. Oh, he had a queasy stomach. He couldn't handle that. And she thought that was so fun. Bring on the next one. So the next one came Fredericks of Pollendorf. And he was aristocratic. He was something. He was just amazing, thought so much of himself, and all he could do is talk to himself about himself. And well, everything went, and he was going to stay the night. So they put him up in the tower there. Well, Frida thought, I love this. So she sent her pet rat up into there and snuck in the door, crawled in bed with Frederick of Puxtorndorf. Man, you should have heard the hollering, screaming from that tower, and it was no time at all that that guy was gone back to his castle. Well, the king was exasperated. There were no more princes to be found. And well, yes, there was more, said one of his attendants. There is Bartholomew of Baden-Baden. He's up there close to the Black Forest. I don't know about that guy. Well, it's the last one. Well, the old king says, call him. So Bartholomew, or nickname Baden Bart, came trotting in. Now, Baden Bart lived close to the Black Forest, and all he wanted to do was hunt and fish. He had a castle that was built of timbers, and his people were happy. They ate fresh meat every day, and there's no taxes or anything like that. And so he came in his leathers, his leather hat. You called? Yes, my daughter. You could have this whole kingdom if you marry my daughter. He measured her up, and she measured him up. She said, looks like a tough cookie, but I'm going to get him. So they went down to the pond, and she found the frog. Oh, isn't it cute? And he says, oh, yes, it's so cute. I like spiders, too. Isn't it cute? Ah! So she was determined. So it come to the meal, the 12-course meal. And she brought out the escargot. Oh, I think this one's alive. It tickles when it goes down. And he goes, that's freshwater. I actually like saltwater snails, the fancy ones, you know, these ones right here. They're much better. That was not good. So he decided to stay in the night. Everything was going great. They were playing tricks on each other. And she sent Charles, the rat, up to the tower. He saw that little rascal. I'm going to send my pet bat down to visit her. Ooh. But you go on down. I know her window's open. I can see it from here. So the bat went flip, 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 into the window, and all of a sudden the roof raised, screaming, screaming, screaming. Nobody got much sleep that night. Well, they decided they would get married the very next day. They were going to have a very merry wedding to you, a very merry wedding to you. And so they had quite a wedding. They tricked everybody, and everybody was, get on out of here, go back with Baden Bart. So he took her back to his wooden castle, and they did okay for a while. They teased each other. They got the horse playing, and they got not having a very good time some, and she just packed up her belongings and went right on back home. But she found out that's boring. That's so boring. So she went on back. This happened back and forth and back and forth. But they actually stuck it out. They had a great time. and teasing each other. They raised about 12 kids who were teasing each other and tormenting the villagers. And, you know, they were hanging from the rafters and all that kind of good stuff. And they lived very unhappy after. Back to you. MC, Brad, back to you.
Thank you, Larry. I'm speechless after that one. Our next story, the storyteller this evening, thank goodness, is Eileen Beck. Eileen has been a Toastmaster at least as long as I have, which is like forever, maybe even longer. I don't know how you do that, but maybe so, I'm not sure. And of late has become more involved in traditional storytelling. She's a teacher, a nurse, and as you'll discover, an excellent storyteller. Ladies and gentlemen, here is Eileen Beck.
Mr. Toastmaster, I decided to tell a story from a book called Horse Sense or Common Sense. That's a bit of a fairy tale within itself. Once upon a time, and not that long ago, in the land of orange groves, in the shadows of Mount Whitney, lived Mr. and Mrs. Sakura and their daughter, Darlene. Mr. and Mrs. Sakura, sorry about that, loved the land of the orange groves. Sun all day with some gentle storms that helped the crops grow. Darlene belonged to the land of the orange groves, but Mr. and Mrs. Sakura did not. They actually came from the land of cherry blossoms in the shadow of Mount Fuji. Now the sun kept shining on this land and everything was wonderful. Occasional gentle storms, but it grew the crops. Everything was very pleasant. Mr. and Mrs. Sakura felt they belonged there. They didn't worry about their daughter, Darlene, because they knew she belonged there. Mr. Sakura felt pretty good because he had some papers that stated where he was from, and these papers stated that he belonged there. Mrs. Sakura didn't have quite those papers. She had papers where she was from and why she was there. However, maybe those gentle breezes blew the papers away. She could not find them. Now, back in the land of, in the shadows of Mount Fuji and those cherry blossoms was an emperor. This emperor was getting a little greedy. He wanted the land of the orange blossoms and the land of the golden wheat and the land of the movie stars and the land of the free. He also wanted the land of the coal and the land of the polar bears. I never quite got that part, but he wanted those things. And he was making up a storm, but it wasn't one of those gentle storms that grew crops or made people healthy. This storm made people mad and scared. Mrs. Sakura was told she didn't belong in the land of the orange groves. And she needed those papers. I got this. And so she was going to go back to the land of the cherry blossoms and get those papers. She was a little frightened though. She didn't know what was going to happen. She brought her daughter Darlene with her. And the nice thing though, she's going to see her mother and her father again, plus her brother. Well, all in the shadows of Mount Fuji. Meanwhile, in the shadows of Mount Fuji, this emperor wanted to show his power. And he made a storm so powerful that the land of sunny beaches, volcanoes, and pineapples, he just destroyed it. Everyone was now really scared. And the emperor was feeling pretty full of himself. Now, Darlene and her mother had to stay in the land of the cherry blossoms and in the shadows of Mount Fuji. But it wasn't so great for them there either. Even though Mrs. Sakura in some ways belonged there, she really didn't. Now, her brother, who wanted to live in the land of cherry blossoms, did not really agree with the emperor. He said he wanted to follow the Prince of Peace. He didn't want to follow what the emperor was doing, destroying everything. So brother was thrown in jail on his own land. while Mrs. Sakura was a prisoner in her parents' house. Guards and soldiers would come in all the time looking for papers, not the papers Mrs. Sakura wanted, but papers that may have given some information about the land of the orange groves or the land of the polar bears. This frightened her, but she was a prisoner in her own house or her parents' house. Now, meanwhile, back in the land of the orange groves, Mr. Sakura felt that he was okay because he belonged in that area. But the leader of that area was scared. He was scared, and so were many other people who looked like the emperor, people who came from where the emperor was coming from. And Mr. Sakura said, no, I do not believe in the emperor. I too believe in the Prince of Peace. But Mr. Sakura was taken from his farm to a prison. Let's see. So, and was that, sorry there. So the storm continued for years and years. And people were all greedy, angry, scared, and hurt. Mr. Sakura was in prison in the desert near his orange groves. Mrs. Sakura was in prison in her mom's and dad's house. And brother was a prison in the vast wastelands near the shadows of Mount Fuji. The leader of the orange groves, the golden wheat, the grand university, and rocket scientist created his own type of storm. And he gave it to the emperor and his land. Unfortunately, it leveled so many buildings and hurt so many people, but the emperor gave up. Now, the good part of this is Mr. Sakura was free, Mrs. Sakura was free, and so was brother and mother and Darlene. They were all free, but where were they going to go? Their farm was sold. Now, this is where the magic comes in. Now, of course, I'm supposed to be telling a fairy tale, and you probably guessed this is not a fairy tale. There was an emperor who was very greedy. There was a world leader that was scared. There were people that spent time in prison. There was a Mr. Sakura and Mrs. Sakura, and there was also no Darlene, because I used to work with her in the burn unit, and she told me this part. But the magic, where did this magic come from? Because they had no place to live. Well, it didn't come from a fairy godmother, because fairy godmothers, as you know, they're into fancy dress parties, you know, like the red carpet gowns, the best hairdresser, manicures. They also love romance, those fairy godmothers do, and intrigue. Well, Mr. and Mrs. Sakura and Darlene, they didn't need that stuff. They needed a home. And white knights in shining armor. Well, you know, they're great for beating up fire-breathing dragons. However, that wasn't the problem either. And when it comes to knights in shining armor, they aren't what they're cracked up to be. Let me tell you that. The horse is always nice. So keep the horse and send the guy packing. That's all I can tell you there. But back, okay. So what happened was that the magic came from some very common people. It came from the people who were right there living amongst the orange groves. And they had a secret potion. They got around a table and threw things in. They threw strategy, interventions, and evaluations, also with a little empathy and goodwill in there, and the golden rule. And then they said the magic words. Now give me 1 minute. I have to look it up. For 1941. Okay, yeah, it's just do it. Now we think that happened in the shadows of Mount Hood about 20 years later. Nope, that's when they first said it. Just do it. And what they did was that all of them, they bought the farm. Now that doesn't sound so good. So let me put it another way. They bought the farm, they bought the house, they bought the farm equipment, and they took care of that farm really well. These people were not afraid of Mr. Sakura. Even though he looked like the emperor, they knew he belonged there. Even if Mrs. Sakura did not have her papers, they knew she belonged there too. So when Mr. and Mrs. Sakura and their daughter, Darlene, were free, they came right back to their house. The house was in perfect condition. The farm was ready to be farmed. Everyone was there for them. So the moral to the story is, regardless, if someone is acting really greedy or someone's acting really scared, you don't always have to listen to them. Listen to yourself and maybe some friends you trust. And then the magical powers of common sense, maybe doing a little planning, doing a little evaluation, throwing in some empathy and the golden rule, you can create more magic and more goodwill than anything else. And it's truly more than magic can ever do. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Eileen. Our next storyteller this evening is Roxanne Strutz. When Roxanne is not telling stories, she grooms dogs. Actually, that's not quite true, because what she tells me is that when she's grooming dogs, she's actually practicing her stories on the dogs. She's been a professional dog groomer in her shop in the same building in Puyallup for 28 years. And many of you I know have been trusting the care of your pets to her for many, many years. Roxanne is also our division director and a blossoming new storyteller. So ladies and gentlemen, here is Roxanne Strutz.
Thank you, Mr. MC. My story has to do with a story that is very old, from the Amazon forest. On the banks of the Amazon, in a little clearing next to the Amazon forest, lived Chimidua, a young girl with now every day, the men would go out with their boys and do hunting and fishing. The girls would help the mothers with the chores around the house and also in farming. But Chimidua, the young girl, would listen wide-eyed as the men told the stories of the forest. She was intrigued. Sometimes she would go in just a little ways, but not enough to get lost, and stare at the trees. Then she would come out again. One day she was sitting, making a basket in the farm plot, and the most beautiful big blue butterfly showed up and fluttered around her. She looked at it. "You are the most beautiful creature in the world. I wish I could be like you." Well, the butterfly tipped its wing as if to say, "Yes, I am." Then, as Chimidua watched the butterfly fly, she put her arms out and mimicked what the butterfly did. She would turn this way when the butterfly did. She turned this way when the butterfly did. Then she was able to rise up when the butterfly did and come back down. And she did this for a very long time, sometimes circling the trees as it went further and further into the forest. After a very long time of playing, the butterfly went between some vines, and then Chimidua could not see her anymore. She stopped and she looked around and realized that she had gone too far into the forest and did not know where she was. There was no sun because of the canopy of the trees. She could not see that. There was no path, no place for her to find how she'd gotten there. And she panicked. She became very frightened. "Father, Mother, anyone!" But only silence. She started to try to find a path, and as she wandered, she eventually heard, she thought, "There is a forest man out here working. Maybe he knows how I can get back home again." And she followed the sound. After a short time, she found a woodpecker. "If only you were human, then I could find my way back home." "What? I have to be human in order to find your way back home? Don't you think that you are the most important person in this whole forest? There is no way that I'm going to help you go home. Can't you see that I'm busy?" And with that, the woodpecker flew away. Chimidua said, "I meant no harm." Chimidua wandered on again, still not finding a path. Over in the distance, she saw what looked like a longhouse with the grandmother in it making a hammock. She rushed towards that longhouse. But as she was just about ready to step into it, the longhouse started to flutter. And the woman, the hammock and the longhouse flew up and landed on a branch. She said, "Grandmother." She said, "Don't you grandmother me." It was a grouse. This particular grouse said to Chimidua, "Why would I help you? I have been hunted by your people for a very long time, my people. And why would I want to help you? Besides, Chimidua, how many of us have you cooked and eaten? What makes you think I'm going to help you?" And with that, she flew off. Chimidua said, "The animals here don't like me. I don't know how I'm going to find my way home." As she wandered, she was starting to get very hungry. As she was wandering along, pretty soon, a mango fruit fell at her feet. She picked it up and she ate it just as quickly as she could. Then another one, she picked it up and ate it too, trying to figure out where this came from. She looked up and saw a band of spider monkeys. She figured that if she followed the spider monkeys, she would not go hungry, because as they fed, any fruit that fell through their fingers, she would be able to eat. That went on the rest of the day. But when nightfall came, Chimidua became frightened again. The forest, she knew at night, had evil spirits. The forest had animals that were scary. And she's thinking to herself, how am I going to go home? What am I going to do? Well, she noticed that the spider monkeys were starting to come down out of the trees. She hid herself to see what they would do. She noticed, and it frightened her, that as each spider monkey touched the earth, they turned into human form. Oh! It wasn't very long before the spider people started circling her. And one of the gentlemen said to her, the spider man, "Chimidua, what are you doing out here? I lost my way and I just don't know how to get back home." A spider monkey woman said to her, "Oh, Chimidua, why don't you come with us? The monkey lord has invited us to a festival tonight. We'll take you back home tomorrow." Chimidua said, "Would you?" So she went with the spider people, spider monkey people, to the longhouse of the spider lord, the monkey lord. As she got there, she noticed that every person that came in, the spider lord, the monkey lord, said to them, "Hello, I'm glad that you make it," until he sees Chimidua. When he saw Chimidua, he looked at her very mean and said, "Human, what are you doing here uninvited?" Well, the spider man, monkey man said, "Well, we found her in the forest and we're going to take her back home tomorrow, but she can be with us tonight." Huh. So she went into the longhouse with the rest of them. While they were in the longhouse, there were some that were playing the flute. Some were singing softly. Some were drinking manioc beer. Well, after a while, they decided to march and to dance around this longhouse, led by the monkey lord. And they did that until it was time for them to go to their hammocks. They all went to bed in their hammocks, and Chimidua tried to sleep. Well, the monkey lord snored so loudly that Chimidua could not sleep. Chimidua listened very intently, and after a while heard the monkey lord saying as he snored, "I will devour Chimidua. I will devour Chimidua." Grandfather, wake up, wake up." "What? What's the matter?" "You said you were going to devour me." That's just this mouth of mine talking. Pay no attention. Go back to sleep." And took a long bowl of manioc beer and laid down to sleep again. Well, Chimidua at this point is rather frightened and can't sleep. Well, the monkey lord did go to sleep. And once again, "I will devour Chimidua. I will devour Chimidua." She looked over at the monkey lord and realized that he was actually a leopard, the magic of the forest. She very quietly got out of her hammock, made it to the door, grabbed up a torch and started running through the forest as fast as she possibly could. And she ran until she ran out of breath and daylight was starting to form. It was morning. She sat down at the edge of the kapok tree and just wept. I will never, ever find my way back home. I hate this forest. I do not understand it. Things are not the way that they should be. Are you sure, Chimejua? Chimejua looked up and saw the biggest, most beautiful blue flower. Grandmother, which is a term that is used for respect. She says, I just don't understand. Well, Chimejua, I know how to get you back home. Follow me. Chimejua got up from the kapok tree and followed the big blue butterfly back to where she saw across the Amazon River the boat landing of her people. This is impossible. Impossible, Chimejua? Well, I don't know how I ever crossed the Amazon River without knowing it. How am I going to get over to the other side of the river where my family is? Chimejua, it's not impossible. I can turn you into a butterfly. And with that, the grandmother butterfly started to chant, wings of blue, eat the dew. Wings of blue, eat the dew. Wings of blue, eat the dew. And as grandmother butterfly chanted, Chimejua noticed that she was getting smaller and smaller. Her arms were getting longer and more spindly, but it wasn't very long before she was flying next to grandmother butterfly. They went across the river as butterflies. Chimejua said to her, this is wonderful. I feel so light and so graceful. I could be a butterfly for the rest of my life. No, Chimejua, that would not be right. You belong with your people. You have a father and a mother that loves you. Oh, but can't I stay with you, grandmother? No, Chimejua. They got to the other side, and the moment that Chimejua's feet touched the ground, she turned back into human again. She bid grandmother butterfly goodbye, and grandmother butterfly said to her, now that you have been a butterfly, you always will have the heart of the butterfly in you. And Chimejua ran up to her longhouse. Toastmaster?
Thank you, Roxanne. Now, since this is a Toastmasters event, the event organizer, Deborah Hartman, is asked that we do a round of table topics. I know that two of our guests anyhow, Earl and Joy, they are new to Toastmasters. Not that we're going to convince them to join or anything, but they're going to get a little experience tonight of what we do in a regular Toastmasters meeting. Tonight, this is going to double as an intermission for us. We have two other speakers, two other storytellers after this. And Louise Fortier is our table topics master tonight. So Louise, I'm going to ask you to take this away, explain for the benefit of our guests exactly what table topics is and how they are going to hopefully be included in this round of table topics. So Louise, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Brad. Welcome, fellow Toastmasters, and most welcome guests. Table topics is a great way to introduce yourself for a 2-minute speech, if you like. We have a theme, and we ask that everybody will talk for 2 minutes. So we get you to stand up on your feet or sit on your chair, and we will speak. So the theme tonight is Once Upon a Time. Once upon a time, there was a pandemic. And what the world needs now is love, sweet love. Tell me a story of all your happiness and your new norm purpose for your next future. Any volunteers? Debbie.
You're muted, Deborah.
Mm-hmm.
The wonders of Zoom.
Yes. So on our journey, we're going to get in a van, and I'm picking you all up because for free. We're going on a journey, and on our journey, we're leaving Washington State. We're going all the way to Victoria, Canada to see Louise. Isn't that exciting? And that's going to be fun to go over the border and have some fantastic time. And Matthew, take over.
And everyone is having a good time as they drive around. For at last, they are free to drive around. Thus, we get in our little van and we decided to drive along. Not only are we going to drive, we are going to drive from here on the West Coast all the way to the East Coast. In fact, we're going to go to New York just to get a bagel because bagels from New York are delicious. But it's not good enough just to fly there. Gotta be quick. We've been cooped up like chickens for over a year and some cents now. Thus, we're gonna get in our little car. And we start driving along. Oh, look, there's a cow. There's a horse. There's museums. There's all sorts of goodies to look at and all sorts of yummy food to eat. Because there's nothing like stopping by those little diners on the road. I know a trucker or two that can attest. Those diners have some of the best food in the whole country. And I know when I was a kid, I always loved stopping at them to try out some local diner food. And that is when Larry went and told us what was going to happen next.
Is this a round robin, or do you have other questions, Louise?
Oh, just a round robin. What would be your
Larry,
happiness?
It seems to me that this is like one of those story continuation things we've done.
Yeah.
That's the way it's shaping up.
Just keep going.
Okay, I will carry on, but I have a princess that is with me right here.
This is definitely spontaneous.
But she has her pigtails, she has her up in her hair now. So, but yes, we drive, but we drive to older folks who are shut in. That is our new norm. That Kathy and I have a day Bible study for older folks who can't not get out in the evening. So they come during the day, and we have a call-in meeting now. So it's all call-in. However, we have been doing drive-bys, porch visits of all kinds of older people. And it has been so awesome. It's just, I mean, these people that are shut in, they feel isolated. And Kathy has made goodie bags for them at times, and we give them goodie bags, have a wonderful visit, and that is our new norm now. So this pandemic has been a real blessing for us. We haven't let it get us down. We have a big job to do, and so we're going to keep on doing it. And I don't think this pandemic's going to be over anytime soon. So me and my princess, we go around and hand out goodie bags. And actually, we're going to be real close to the Canadian border in a week or so, and to see in Linden, a friend up there who has been shut in for a year. And so we're going to go check her out and take her a Subway sandwich and have a great old time. And I'm going to, Louise, I'm just going to turn it over to you. You're the director. You send somebody else out. Okay, please.
We can pass it over to Linda. Or how about one of our guests? What's your happiness of your new norm? Would you like to volunteer? Thanks, Joy. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thanks for the invitation, Brad. This was fun. Once upon a time, way back when we spent our days driving all over the place, going to meetings and libraries and things like that. And now we're worshiping Zoom and all that it means, and grateful for that wonderful kind of connection. And I think that many of it that I hope goes over to the new norm, the norm that will come, is that we learn to grasp the smallest things and celebrate. Isn't it kind of funny sometimes when you realize you just laughed and you haven't laughed probably the whole day, or something? You found some silly thing on TV, you got a card in the mail, you mailed out a bunch of cards and heard that somebody got them, and those kind of little moments have really added up. And wow, let's not lose that. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. Our other guest, Earl, would you like to tell us your new happiness norm? You just have to unmute yourself, hon.
Wait, what?
There you go.
All right. I guess I'm unmuted now.
Thank you.
We've been watching quite a few movies that we've taped over the years, kind of going for walks. My wife has dementia here for the last couple of years, so we're just kind of sticking around the house. We have quite a few of our children are living close by, and they've been dropping in. Also, I've been putting bicycles and shipping bicycles out from church. So I've been doing that once or twice a month as new ones come in and the missionaries go home. And so we've been able to kind of get out and enjoy things. So we're also doing a little remodeling upstairs. I'm putting in a chest of drawers into the wall and opening a door there to make storage next to it. And I'm in the process of finishing that up right now. And that's about it.
Thanks, Earl. Excellent. Madonna, would you like to share your happiness?
Certainly. Thank you so much for asking, Louise. I've got to say that my new happiness has been meeting people on Zoom. It really has. And the majority of the people I meet, of course, are people involved in Toastmasters. And I have also had an opportunity to judge contests for DECA, Distributive Education Clubs of America, and for FBLA, Future Business Leaders of America. That has been, yes, that has been a fulfilling experience, because young people who are used to competing in person, and I have judged in person events like this, are now having to really prep and prepare themselves to speak via Zoom or to prepare a recorded presentation and have it judged by someone. I have found that to be exciting and a new happy thing to do during the pandemic. Louise, thank you very, very much for asking.
Thanks, Madonna. So Eileen.
Well, you know, we all hate the mask, but how many of us have gotten a cold this year? How many of us got the plain old flu? So the problem is, I don't like the mask. It fogs up my glasses, but perhaps we might be dropping them maybe in October, but I just might keep on wearing that mask through the cold and flu season, because it's really enjoyable not to have the cold or flu. So there might be that. I might not. Yeah. Then again, I might just say, forget it. I'll suffer with the cold. But then, so that might be something that might be my thing. Also, I think a little happiness is because I used to drive to work and drive to Toastmasters meet and stuff like that. And I do miss seeing everybody. I do miss Denny's. There's a lot of things I miss, but then it's quite cozy just sitting in your house too. And I do, you know, that's not bad either. So in person's better, but this isn't a bad alternative. And then you were saying that it's not really my new normal, but what I'd really like to do, you were talking about kind of traveling through Canada. I was thinking, I like Canada. I wouldn't mind traveling there, go to Calgary, go to, where's Banff, but what's way up there? I forget. But, and because I've been there quite a few times, going up to Alaska and back. And I just feel like getting in the car when this is all over, going, and I got to get my passport up to date, but going up to Canada and just, it's a nice place up there, and just go up there and maybe just spend a week doing nothing. I'm topic master, sorry there.
Thanks, Eileen. Do we have time for some more? How about the birthday girl, Roxanne?
Yes.
What makes me very happy? I guess it's the forced education of learning how to use a computer, because of the fact that there's so much that I have to do now where I've always used paper, and now I've got a forced education on how to use the computer. And as I do that, it sometimes is easier, faster, but you know, I miss the feel of paper. And sometimes, well, see, when I do my journals, which I haven't done last year, but when I write my journals, I always write them out longhand, but I also figured out I have to print them. You know why? Because in 50 years, they may not know cursive. So therefore I have to print mine in order for everybody 50 years from now to understand what it is I'm writing, what it's like to work and live in the pandemic time and before. I've kept up journals now for about 15 years. And I look back on them now and I think, really? I did that? I got up at 5 o'clock in the morning and drove from Renton to Port Angeles and then drove back home again? And it's like, yes, I did. I was young and I was stupid, but nevertheless, what I'm finding is that learning to use the computer, not being afraid to push the wrong button, and also my cell phone, that has really helped. When cell phones first came out and I saw one of these things, I thought it was the most stupid thing in the world to have. Well, guess what? This is a prophecy that I had years ago, that we would hold a computer in our hand that was much more powerful than the computers that we have on our laptops. And guess what? It is. So therefore I'm a prophetess. It makes me happy. Toastmaster.
Brad, you're just itching.
Well, I might be the final one here to wrap this up, so we get going again. You know, this has been interesting. I don't know about loving it or anything like that. You know, fortunately, us people who we've had good timing in being able to retire when we did, and this pandemic hasn't been the real life upheaving catastrophe that it has been for so many folks, not only here but in the world. I am struck by something though. Every 40 years in this country, there is an inflection point. Every 80 years, there is a major inflection point. And I mean historical, actual, you know. So and the last one was the Great Depression back in the 30s and the 30s. And I think that what we're going through right now and the aftermath of this is going to be historically relevant and significant, even in comparison to the Great Depression. I think that's how transformative this pandemic and what the ramifications are going to be going forward as a result of this pandemic. Now, I said that a lot of us who our timing was good, we were retirees and not having to suffer a lot like some of the younger folks, especially younger business owners. But you know, the downside of that is, I don't think we're going to be around long enough to really see all of the great things that are going to happen here. And so fortunately, I believe in reincarnation, and I'll be back very soon to take part.
Thank you, Brad. And thank you, Earl and Joy. Awesome. Thanks for stepping up.
Thank you, Louise. We have two more storytellers left. And our stories, Madonna and myself, and our stories are going to be a little bit longer, not too much longer, but we'll be closing up the show here. So let's go ahead and resume our storytellers. Our next storyteller this evening is Madonna Hanna. You heard Madonna in our table topics session there. Now, Madonna, of course, is a Toastmaster. She doesn't belong to our particular club, but Madonna is also an actress, a world-class athlete, and an award-winning public speaker. She's also an author, having written a collection of children's stories that's not yet released to the public. Well, that may change this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, here is Madonna Hanna.
Thank you. Tonight, I'm going to share 3 incidents from my childhood. The reason I wrote my children's book is because my little brother passed away in 1992, and my niece, Danielle, never got to meet him. So I thought, why not write a book and share stories of the 3 siblings, which I'm the oldest. I was 9 years older than my brother and 13 years older than my sister. And you know, people would actually say to me, why is there such a big gap between you and your brother? What do I have to do with that? I tell them, ask my parents. Here we go. Once upon a time, many, many decades ago, my brother, sister, and I spent a summer with my grandmother, Ethel Jenkins. She lived in Pensacola, Florida, not in the residential areas or the areas where there were lots and lots of beautiful beaches, but in sort of a very rural area. Her home sort of resembled a log cabin, but it was painted white. And yes, she had indoor plumbing, and there were many amenities we did not have, which...
Can you turn my lamp on?
There were many amenities that we didn't have at her home, but we enjoyed ourselves anyway. This particular story takes place one morning when my brother and sister were absorbed in their little conversation as they were getting ready to go outside to play. I heard 8 words that chilled my spine. The black egg that looks like a pineapple. I'm a very visual person. And I thought, a black egg that looks like a pineapple? That kind of sounds like a hand grenade. Oh, no, no, no. I stopped my brother and sister and said, were you guys talking about a black egg? And they looked at me like I'm a fool and said, yeah. Oh, I'm trying to hold myself together and these kids are calm. Well, where did you see this? Well, my brother decides to just troop on outside. And my little sister says, in the closet, in the living room. Like, what? She walks to the closet. She opens the door. And just like one of the models on The Price is Right, as she opens the door, she presents her hand out like she's getting ready to show us a brand new 2021 Cadillac that's fully appointed. And she has this look on her face like, and I look in the closet. There's hat boxes. There's clothes hanging from a rod. And on the floor in the corner are 3 hand grenades. Oh my gosh. They're sort of nestled between a shotgun and a rifle. And I'm looking at my sister, who's looking very calmly at me. And oh, okay. Please, I don't want you and your brother to touch these things. As I was thinking, why does my grandmother have this small arsenal in the front closet? I know that my grandmother has a tendency, especially around Halloween. My mother used to tell me that she was always embarrassed when Halloween came around because my grandmother would take the shotgun out and shoot at the trick-or-treaters. Like, oh, and okay, but the hand grenades. I figured I should call my mother and immediately tell her that her mother has this small arsenal in the closet. Lo and behold, the next day when I looked into the front closet, the hand grenades were gone. The rifle and the shotgun was still there, but the hand grenades were gone. Fellow Toastmasters, I had all sorts of horrible, horrible thoughts running through my head because I was thinking about what if my brother and sister had handled the black eggs that look like a pineapple. The second incident takes place at our dinner table. This is at our own home in the white suburbs of Boston. My mother and father both worked. My mother worked in the afternoons and my father worked in the evenings. Therefore, my father was the one who cooked dinner each night. He was a very good cook. And each night there was a floor show. We sat at a round table. My father sat across from me, and my brother sat to my left and my sister to my right. My father would always look down at his plate. My sister would always look at my brother, who would make faces at her. And she would always say, Daddy, Scuba's making faces at me. And my brother would laugh and my sister would whine all the time. And I would just watch the show and watch my father look down at his plate. Well, this would go on for a while, practically every night. But this particular night, we were having fried chicken, mashed potatoes, string beans, and a salad, lettuce, tomatoes. My brother decided to take a tomato slice and put it on his eye. He looked across at my sister, making faces, and my sister, Scuba's got a tomato on his face and he's making faces at me. My father decides to look up. Seconds before he does, my brother snatches the tomato slice from his eye. And he's looking very innocent. Daddy, I'm not doing anything. I'm just eating my food. Well, my father looks at my brother. I'm looking at my brother. And there is a jellied tomato seed slowly dripping down his face. Mr. Innocent. And my father shakes his head, doesn't say anything, and looks back down at his plate. Incident number 3, which takes place at the kitchen table again, but this time it's breakfast. My little brother is momentarily going to be going to kindergarten. There's a station wagon that picks him up. I'm in middle school and I'm eating breakfast, alphabet cereals. My mother has chosen that morning to have a workman come in to seal the couch and side chairs up in plastic. I don't know how many of you remember sitting on chairs that were encased in plastic. But anyway, the workman shows up early. He's a little short Irish man. He's bald. He's got freckles. He's a stout little man. He's got his tools. He's all ready to go. My mother is brushing my little brother's hair. She's just, putting the finishing touches on him before he's got to go to kindergarten. My brother looks up at my mother and very seriously says, "Is that man my father?" Gosh. I said, "I'm eating a bowl of alphabet cereal." I'm not embarrassed to tell you that the milk came flying out of my nose. My mother's in shock. The poor little Irish guy has dropped all of his tools. And my mother is looking at me and looking at my brother, who is serious. He's still looking up at my mother, waiting for an answer. And my mother's very indignant, said, "You know your father's at work." And the poor workman, he's shaking because he has no idea what he has gotten himself into. Oh, all I know is my brother went off to school. I went off to school, leaving my mother and the workman alone. And all I could think of was at the end of the day when that little Irish man went home to South Boston and went into a pub, to have a beer with his friends. And when they asked him, what was your day like? He would have quite a story to tell. And that was once upon a time, many, many decades ago. Back to you, Brad.
Thank you, Madonna. Well, our final storyteller tonight, this evening, is me, who, as usual, is bucking the trend in that I will not be telling a fairy tale tonight, although we really didn't hear that many fairy tales tonight, but rather I'm going to be telling a sort of kissing cousin to the fairy tale, which is a tall tale. And this tall tale is entitled A Tall Tale. Pretty clever, huh? You know, storytelling goes back a long ways. So does reading, just not as far. And while telling a story requires at least two folks, you, me, and the more the better, reading, even if it's reading a story, can be done by one person in a book. And while that's not as entertaining as telling a story, well, it's better than nothing, especially when you're sitting out on the farm, like they did in the old days when the nearest neighbor is 2 miles away and town is 10. Well, they didn't have a lot to do for entertainment. So they invented the dime novel, which if they were still around today, you would find prominently displayed in a rack where you stand in line at the supermarket checkout. Now, in the early days of the dime novel, they mostly wrote about American frontiersmen, real ones like Davy Crockett and Wild Bill Hickok and their larger-than-life exploits. Later, when they ran out of real-life frontiersmen to write about, well, they started making them up, mostly by newspaper men who, in order to sell more newspaper, invented mythological American folk heroes like Paul Bunyan and John Henry and Pecos Bill. Except they didn't really invent them because they'd already been invented by lumberjacks and railroad men and cowboys who for decades would entertain each other by swapping stories about these characters in their logging camps and their railroad camps and their bunkhouses in the evening after work was over, sitting around the camp stove. Each man in turn making his version of the story more outlandish than the previous one. Bragging contest when you come down to it, which in polite society came to be known as telling tall tales. The taller, the better. For instance, in the logging camps up in northern Minnesota, the tall tale of the larger-than-life lumberjack, Paul Bunyan, was born. Literally. The story goes that Paul was so big, it took 5 storks to deliver him to his parents, who had to milk 24 cows every morning and evening just to keep his milk bottle full. Not only that, Paul grew so big so fast that when it rained and filled up all the footprints that he made from wandering around Minnesota, why, it formed the 10,000 lakes. See what I mean? Anyhow, when Paul Bunyan grew up, he invented logging. Then he and his crew of lumberjacks logged all the timber that built America. Now, what Paul Bunyan was to lumberjacks, John Henry was to railroad workers. See, John Henry was a steel driver. He drilled holes in solid rock, pounding on a spiked chisel with a 9-pound hammer. Then they filled those holes up with dynamite to blast railroad tunnels through the mountains. Now, the legend is that John Henry, the most powerful and strongest man working the rails, won a contest between himself and a new invention at the time, a steam drill. The steam drill drilled 8 inches before it broke down. John Henry, wielding 2 9-pound hammers, one in each hand, drilled 15, an unheard of feat, before he laid down and died. That left the cowboys, who, not to be outdone by the lumberjacks and the railroad workers, invented their own larger-than-life legend to brag about, which was Pecos Bill, the greatest cowboy that ever was, who was raised by coyotes, once lassoed a giant tornado with a 50-foot rattlesnake named Shake and invented the 6-shooter among his other feats. And that's the tall tale I'm going to tell you tonight, the story of Pecos Bill. Yes, sir, the greatest cowboy that ever... Wait a minute, you already know that part. So how's about I start this story off instead when Bill was 2 years old and some claim jumping squatters moved to within 50 miles of his family's house, meaning the neighborhood was getting a mite overcrowded. So his ma and pa loaded up all their belongings in their covered wagon, including Bill and his 15 siblings, and headed out to the boonies, meaning West Texas, in search of a little more personal space. But as they were crossing the Pecos River, little Bill, who was riding in back, was bounced clean out of that wagon and into the Pecos River. And it wasn't until the family made camp that evening and started counting up kids that they realized little Bill was missing. So they organized a search, which didn't turn up nothing, because by that time, Bill had already floated 60 miles down the Pecos River, having the time of his life. And when he got tired of swimming, he rolled over and he's floating, I should say. He rolled over and swam another 60 miles until he decided it was time to swim to shore as night was falling on the West Texas prairie and the coyotes began howling at the moon. And when Bill heard that, why, he started into howling in too, which instantly attracted the pack. And when that pack of coyotes came up on Bill, why, they looked at him and he looked at them, and well, it just broke their coyote hearts. So they adopted little Bill, made him one of their own. And for the next 15 years, Bill had the time of his life being a coyote, chasing prey, howling at the moon, and scratching at fleas. Till one day, Bill was taking a drink out of the river when this cowboy who was watering his herds, a herd of longhorns, came up from behind. "Hey," hollered the cowboy, "what are you doing running around out here without no clothes?" When Bill turned around, the cowboy recognized him as his long-lost little brother. "Well, I'll be," said the cowboy. "Ain't you my little brother Bill, who we lost while crossing the Pecos River?" "Don't reckon," Bill said, who let out a holler so loud it nearly stampeded that entire herd. "I'm a coyote," he said. "A coyote?" his brother shot back. "You ain't no coyote. Looky here. If you're a coyote, how's come you ain't got no long, scraggly tail? Coyotes got long, scraggly tails." And when Bill looked back, sure enough, no tail. "Huh, well, maybe so," Bill reasoned, "but I got fleas and I can howl at the moon." "Psst, that ain't nothing," his brother informed him. "Everybody in Texas has fleas and howls at the moon. Besides, you can walk on your own 2 feet, can't you?" "Well, yeah," Bill granted. "And you can talk too. Coyotes can't do that. Now, quit fooling around and get some clothes on. It's about time you learned to become a cowboy." Now, you remember I mentioned earlier that in telling these tall tales, each man in the bunkhouse tries to make his version more outlandish than the previous ones. Well, this is the point in the story of Pecos Bill where it's handed off to the next one. And as you can see, things really start to get wild. So, with Bill's upbringing, the next man continued, being raised a coyote and all, you can imagine Bill had a different perception of what cowboying was all about, resulting in the fact that he didn't take too kindly to the learning he was receiving from his brother. It was unimaginative, Bill said. So he decided that he would invent cowboying from the ground up. And off he walked across the prairie, deep in thought on that subject. Yeah, for 17 days and 17 nights, Bill walked and thought, until one day, while passing through a narrow rock-rimmed canyon, Bill heard a rumble and a rattle so violent, he thought the sides of the canyon was coming down on him. But it wasn't the sides of the canyon coming down on him. what he heard was the rattle of a 50-foot rattlesnake named Shake, who had got that large by eating every cowboy that crossed his path. And when Shake saw Bill, he thought, dinner. But what Shake didn't count on was that when Bill was a coyote, one of the first things he learned was how to wrestle rattlesnakes. So when Shake moved in, why, the fight was on. For 3 whole days, Pecos Bill and Shake, the 50-foot rattlesnake, wrestled in that canyon, each one getting the better of the other, till finally Bill got a headlock on Shake that he couldn't wriggle out of, and Shake cried uncle. So Bill let up on him, which is only fair when someone cries uncle. And Shake, well, he admired that. So from that day on, Pecos Bill and Shake, the 50-foot rattlesnake, became partners. Yes, sir. Bill coiled him up like a rope, tossed him over his shoulder, and off they went, walking across the prairie. Well, next day, Bill and Shake were passing through another narrow rock-rimmed canyon when all of a sudden they heard a blood-curdling roar echoing off the canyon walls. And until it go louder and louder until at last they came face to face with a gargantuan man-eating mountain lion who, like Shake before him, had gotten that large by eating every cowboy that crossed his path. And like Shake before him, he was intent on eating Bill. But this time, Bill had a plan. See, one of the inventions that Bill thought up during his tussle with Shake was something he called the lasso, Shake being the lasso. So when that mountain lion charged, Bill was already twirling Shake around in a big loop, which he tossed over the mountain lion's head, lassoing him around the neck, and cinching that up, why, he jumped on that mountain lion's back and rode him like a bucking bronco. Yes, sir. And from that day on, Bill only rode mountain lions until the day came when he met the only horse that was ever a match for him, Widowmaker, who, as you could imagine, got his name for the obvious reason. No man ever rode him and lived to tell about it, except for Bill. Now, here's where this tall tale is passed to the next cowboy in the bunkhouse, whose job it is to wrap it up in as wild a fashion as possible. So once Bill broke Widowmaker, the final storyteller picks the narrative up, that horse and him, or that horse fell fast in, well, actually he fell fast in love with him. And the two of them and Shake decided, well, it was about time they all went into business. So they went into business lassoing cattle, which they became so good at, they once lassoed a whole herd of longhorns all at one time, till eventually they lassoed so many, it took all of West Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona to hold them all. Then the drought came, so bad that all of the cattle and horses and even people were drying up and blowing away. When luck would have it, up to the north, Bill spied a giant tornado, biggest twister ever seen in those parts, which gave him an idea. Now, everyone knew that Pecos Bill could ride anything that ever bucked or bronked. Bill knew it too. So, as they said, he had an idea. He coiled up Shake, tossed him over his shoulder, then jumped on Widowmaker, and he rode north toward that twister just as fast as Widowmaker could run. And when they got to the base of it, he uncoiled Shake, stood up in the saddle, and lassoed that giant tornado, grabbing it around the spout before turning it north and riding it all the way to Lake Michigan. And when they got there, he pulled that tornado down and held it there until it had sucked up all the water out of Lake Michigan, before turning it south again toward Texas, where he pulled out his 6-shooters and started shooting holes in it, turning it into a sprinkling can, big one, which sprinkled out all of that water it sucked up over his land, his neighbors, and the rest of the Southwest, saving 3 whole states plus half of Oklahoma from the drought, before turning that twister west toward California, where he jumped off and then landed down, and landed down so hard that the hole that he made turned into Death Valley. Now, you heard me mention the 6-shooter. Well, along with the lasso, Bill invented the 6-shooter as well. He also invented the branding iron, rodeos, cowboy songs, and those big shiny belt buckles that cowboys wear. He was also married 12 times and outlived every one of his wives, most of them by natural means. But even legends don't live forever and must one day go to meet their maker. So when it was his time, Bill, in his typical understated fashion, left this earth in a manner befitting a man of his character. It came about one day when this city slicker fella from New York came to town. You know the type, fancied himself a bit of a cowboy. Well, this fella, he walked into Macy's. Did you know they had a Macy's in Lubbock? Well, I guess they did, because he walked in, bought himself a pair of Neiman Marcus lizard skin cowboy boots, a Calvin Klein designer Western shirt and pair of jeans, and a spotless white 10-gallon Gucci cowboy hat. And when that feller came out, Pecos Bill took one look at him, keeled over, and died laughing. And that's the truth. And that's our show for this evening. I'm going to turn it over now to our organizer, Deborah Hartman.
Let's all give a big hand to Brad. You did an awesome job. And let's give another big hand to Matthew. Great job. Unmute yourself, Matthew.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to end the recording, but we are all welcome to continue chatting.